Thank you for joining Unleash the Potential today as we discuss with David Isaac, an Indigenous entrepreneur who is a thought leader and infrastructure developer of the green economy. David and I discuss what the priorities are for Indigenous community development and how important it is for Indigenous communities to play a role in unleashing the power of the environment to transition us to a green economy. I hope you enjoy the show as the solar winds are picking up. Thank you. Welcome to Unleash the Potential. I'm Rob Barlow, and I'm here with David Isaac from WDusk. Welcome, David. You're on the West Coast, or should I call it Wet Coast? Maybe you want to, explain to the audience a little bit about your company and why you started it.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to report it's actually it looks like a nice high pressure system today, blue skies. It's not quite January yet, but I hear it's probably gonna be wet. But yeah, I'm with
beautiful nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. It's liquid sunshine. But yeah, I'm actually, I guess this would be considered semi-Yamu First Nation traditional territory, where we're specifically located, but it's Coast Salish territory nonetheless. I myself am a Mi'kmaq, originally from Listerkish, Quebec, a community on the border of New Brunswick. We're basically the name and the genesis of WDusk is actually an abbreviation or a short form version of Wagadusk, which was my traditional Mi'kmaq name, which was given to me by my grandfather, my late grandfather, David Isaac, as well as the then chief Alphonse Metallic, who was a great leader in our community. So it's an honor to have the name, and I'm really the first of this sort of modern generation to have that name. So it's a responsibility. But as funny, it's translated. It means Northern Lights, which is essentially solar wind, and so I kind of come by the name honestly, I guess.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, you have to tell us more. That's quite an interesting connection.
Yeah. So basically, it's the heart of the work we do is we're technically energy developers, but I like to think our DNA is more community developers. In that we don't look just at one sector or one sort of pillar of community. We realize, particularly in remote and First Nations communities, that solutions aren't just singular. The world and the reality is it's beyond the sort of the manageable bureaucracy that we have. Obviously, it's designed to facilitate grants and transactions and governance, but in reality, things work in concert. Things work in a multi-systems approach. And so we try to take that perspective to all of our projects. So first of all, everything is connected, and as well, particularly in this new digital era, as you're aware, from your wireless telecommunications background, that things are increasingly becoming digitized, particularly in energy, particularly the management of infrastructure, information, media, transportation. There's a new industrial revolution upon us, and that obviously bodes well for a multi-sectoral approach. And so I think, obviously, from a deployment perspective and planning and engineering perspective, if you can design systems that are plug and play and designed together, you can deploy them more efficiently, you can manage them more efficiently. So a lot of the old, I guess, prohibitive myths about operations and maintenance, about remote communities, a lot of that can sort of be alleviated or mitigated now just through this digital world we live in, with sensors, with IoT, etc. So back in the day when I started, everybody said, focus, focus, David, young David. In business, you got to focus on one thing. I always sort of countered that. And now, as it turns out, I think it's proving itself, because you can't do community development if you're only a one-trick pony.
Yeah, so you're doing community development for Indigenous communities. Is there any geographical constraints for you? Is it just Canada, or?
Well, right now it's Canada. Pre-COVID, we plan to go to actually the U.S., the Southeast. We Turtle Island is pre-contact. North America was considered Turtle Island. Funny, actually, if you look at it from a Google Earth perspective, it kind of looks like a snapping turtle. It's a bit abstract, but you can kind of see it when you think about it. Funny enough, I don't think that's why it was called that. But anyhow, I'm not saying that we had satellite imagery pre-Columbus, but maybe we had other means of knowledge. But long story short, primarily Indigenous communities in North America, but we do have aspirations to work with our brothers and sisters in Central South America, and are currently on about a year into conversations with Indigenous Australia as well. And so we're seeing a lot of parallels, particularly in the whole sort of post-colonial or colonial process of communities or nations. Almost a exact same sort of pattern of disparity, whether it's economic or social or health. So it's very it reinforces the problems, but also the solutions, and how globally applicable these solutions are. So we have a lot to learn from other jurisdictions globally, and conversely, we can also share some of our successes. And so I think that there's a really neat, again, because of the digital movement and communications like this, we're able to really download and upload a lot of information and knowledge, create a network of like-minded businesses and individuals.
So what kind of projects would you do, would you undertake in Indigenous communities?
We almost always start with energy, because that is sort of our jam, I'd say our passion. That's where I sort of dedicated most of my career to. Energy is when you think of what are the pillars of a robust, healthy community or city or town, it's the basics. It's food, energy, water, housing, and then interestingly, of course, telecommunications and broadband, Wi-Fi. So whenever we've been in communities, there's usually a comprehensive community plan or some sort of strategic plan that they have. And it's usually those items that are sort of the priority. But broadband is interestingly usually one of the top three, top five. So.
Wow. So what is the biggest challenge for you implementing the projects with the communities that you work with, and how do you make those projects get the support that they need?
The biggest challenge, I'd say, from an energy perspective is no longer the intent to convert to a modern, clean grid, but it's more so policy and the lack of readiness, the lack of policy environment to really enable the transition away from what I call just a neo-colonial military technology in the form of oil and gas. Basically, it's just moving our mindset and our collective sort of moving the policymakers away from the the old technology paradigm and sort of waking them up. Now, with I don't want to blame COVID. This was happening long before COVID, but the whole sort of oil crash price, getting into things like negative interest rates before the negative oil prices was already precedented. Much of the economy has been sort of inflated with these free money, basically. It's just been almost an artificial economy based on resource extraction. So I think this transition has been undergoing for quite a while, and the biggest challenge is policy. So, and moving away from that mindset. Yeah.
So is there opportunities for Indigenous communities when it comes to energy and the other sustainable infrastructure that's really important for them? Is there some kind of strategy that they have put together collectively, or are you actually helping them do that?
We're helping them on one community after one community. I have been a strong proponent for a national energy plan, which Canada doesn't have collectively, which is crazy. So I think if First Nations can play a role, not as typically as we see in other industries, previously mentioned, less so the token position, but more so a role of actual leadership and influence. I think now is the time for our peoples to really influence the policy and a national strategy. I think if you look at all the progressive countries around the world, Italy, France, what have you, their big focus right now post-COVID and stimulus of economy is logic, and that being following the green stimulus trend and pathway. So I think that's our vehicle. This is the new sort of framework that not only governments and economies need to start looking at, but I think on the microcosm level, First Nations have already been doing it, and we've already been sort of isolated from it economically anyways. We've been in isolation for centuries. So we're well positioned to sort of transition into this new economy. And obviously we already have a philosophical and worldview alignment that only accelerates it. So I think there was a recent study last year where 1 in 5 clean tech projects in Canada had First Nations sort of leadership component to it. So we're early adopters, but globally, Canada are laggards. We really need to become a top global player in clean tech. And so what an opportunity to rebuild and to attach your economy to something that just is good for globally, good for the environment, but also locally is self-sustaining. So moving away from these old sort of paradigms. So it's I feel quite optimistic that logic will prevail in our new economy, and First Nations will play a significant role.
So First Nations communities, really, if they come to you, you're actually giving them autonomy with respect to energy, right? In a decentralized kind of model. And
certainly, yeah. I mean, it's the technology of decolonization. It's the technology of autonomy. Absolutely. I think it's part of a platform. I mean, if you can attach. I mean, we joke about the sunlight here, but if you can attach if you can have an offtake agreement, and this is where policy comes into place. This is where we need utilities to become more socially minded, where we need to, if we can if a small community, every community in Canada can start selling power and be locked into 20 to 30-year offtake or power purchase agreements or energy purchase agreements, and attach it to something like the sun. So as sure as the sun rises, a modest revenue will be coming. Like how much more poetic and how much better does it get than that? Like, what the heck? Like, yeah, sign us up. So, yeah, it's just a win-win. It's a beautiful form of energy. It's just baffling the lack of uptake and just the incredible amount of brain trust we already have in the tech sector. Uh, Even Vancouver over here, we're one of the hubs in Canada. There's so many, this new economy where Canada is so well positioned to become leaders globally again. We're not right now. We need to catch up, and yeah. So it's a good time to be in this position where an economy is actually based on self-sufficiency, and it's based on environmental merit, and it's based on improving the quality of life. I think these are things that have been lacking in the last couple generations, and I think it shows through in how we sort of interact with each other, the world, nature, and there's a general sense of cognitive, there's cognitive dissonance. There's a real, I think, identity crisis for a lot of businesses and economies that are based on destructive means and that are perpetuating effectively, colonial histories. So I think the sooner we can get off of, a parasitic type of economy from an environmental and economic perspective, the quicker we can, as an identity and as a country, be more proud and move towards innovation, true innovation.
Well, this is great. Like you truly are unleashing the potential. You're taking the sun, bringing it to communities, giving them autonomy, solving a problem from a pride, and giving them something back to add it all up into a bigger ecosystem across Canada, the United States, and in Australia. So if somebody was going to, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to do some infrastructure development or a new energy project, how can they contact you?
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. wduskgroup.com. So www.wduskgroup.com. There's some contact info, or maybe they can DM us through the link here. But yeah, we're definitely at a phase or in our evolution where we're in that somewhat uncomfortable, and I'm glad we didn't scale up pre-COVID, but we're definitely moving towards a scale up position in our trajectory position right now. But yeah, we're looking into also larger project development using economies of scale, particularly in solar, where we want to get into the multi-megawatt space a little bit more, while keeping the integrity of community owned, and finding that balance between, I guess, what's that saying? The difference between poison and medicine is dosage, and I think that's particularly true for renewable energy, or energy in general. You need to find that right balance, and so we're trying to push the limits of that, and so that's where we're looking into larger capital projects, and we're looking for investors that are more progressive, and maybe can also see some of them more the social impact ROIs as well. But mind you, a very much more stable form of energy, and one that's not tied to military activity or factions and geopolitical rifts. This is safe, secure, crown corporation, usually utilities. This is the new gold. So yeah, we're definitely looking for interested investors and partners.
Excellent. Well, I'd really like to just say thank you, David. And You are doing great work, and thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Finally, appreciate you having me.
All
Thank
right.
you.
There you have it, another inspiring founder and entrepreneur that is working really hard to use technology or develop ideas to unleash the potential to make the world a better place. Hit subscribe on your YouTube channel, and please follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And stay tuned for next week's inspiring talk. Thank you.